All right, guys. Well, welcome back. So today we're going to be talking about what the studies of American literature are and what makes them important when it comes to studying American literature or even history, for that fact. And so, for part one of this series, we're going to be talking about specifically the importance of it and how it's affected the way that we view history. And then we'll be hopping into the second part. Um, when we talk about American customs. Um, so, yes, starting off, I answer the question that basically asks what are the studies of American literature, and so going more into depth about that, it's basically asking like what makes the studies of American literature so important, and it's a question that you ask yourself, and it's even in our syllabus, as stated by our professor, um, about what we're going to be learning before coming into the class. And so that was a question that was asked beforehand, and now we're being asked it again towards the end. And so my answer to that is the studies of American literature are time, place, and insights on what the American, quote, um, is an American culture. And so that even like goes into depth about identity and values that are important to the American society. And so something that we learned within this class about American literature and even studying it um, is that time and place are very important. When we look at certain surveyors, like Josiah Strong or even Carlos Bulasan or Americo Paredes, we see that there's different times and place that tell their stories. For instance, Josiah Strong was in a certain era of his life where certain things were more important, and the social gospel was a really huge thing. And we even go about with Americo Paredes, where he just talks about the border life and how um, his book um, helped really shape the studies that are being made about American literature, and even the same with Carlos Bolasan, um, with coming to America and what that looked like. And so we have a lot of surveyors within our class where we're able to learn about these specific things, which make it really interesting and really fun. And it even something that I've been learning frequently as an English literature major is there's there's time and place for a lot of things, but when we study history in America, it's more understanding different perspectives, you know, different insights is something that I've learned a lot when it comes to studying history and American literature, because you don't just see one perspective. You see multiple perspectives. You see the perspectives of many, and it's honestly something that's helpful to me personally when studying any of this. And so I find it to be, very important to study American literature and, to understand what different people have gone through, that we don't just live in one America. I think obviously the concept of the American dream is super huge, um, and even Carlos Bulasan talks about that as well, where it's like, man, like this American dream is such a concept where it's like, man, I wish I had that. And he strives for it, and he talks about it in his book about how he strives for it. He wants it, and that dream isn't something that just gets put in front of you the second you cross that border to America. It's something that has to come. And a lot of people aren't like him to where they will see that other side, but some people did. And he still loved like that fact of America. And so a lot of people don't see that. A lot of people don't see the border life unless you study it. You know what I mean? Unless you're studying Chicano literature and Chicano borders, then it's like, okay, then I'll know about that. But if you're not studying it, then um, it's not something you know. And so going off of that, I think reading it really helps focus on the tensions between ideals and living experiences that have featured texts and called our attention. And so I think focusing on that specifically, it's like the tensions that happen between, you know, a European descent, uh, white person compared to someone of Indian descent who's from a reservation, or you know, a Filipino migrant who comes for work and works in the working class, along with um, along with people who have also who have migrated from a certain place only to try and seek identity. I think all these things are really important because throughout the course we've gotten to learn about these ideals, these tensions, these things, and each surveyor has placed that in their books, and even in their research, and in their memoirs, and in their writings, and in their poetry and their music. It's all something that comes together because I think it tackles the concepts of, like, hey, if we're in America, the land of the brave and the free, and you know yeah, people did move to America, but yeah, people were even born in America but just weren't your typical looking American, if that even is a real thing. But like that tension that came with that, where it's like, hey, I don't look like this, hey, I'm not this, hey, I am different. And it challenges the beliefs of, like, man, what is America, like, what is America, what does it mean to be American? And so, which is something we tackle a little bit later in an article. But yeah, and then something too is, um, I think these studies in American literature, I think the readings that we read in this class, they educate us on what has already happened in the past. And so, um, I'm even thinking, like, even in this class, but in certain aspects when it comes to, uh, the civil rights movement from James Baldwin, when we get another perspective on that, and even just understanding what that looks like, and even Vine de Loria, I think, also gives that perspective during the civil rights movement. I think seeing both James Baldwin and him, um, at some point, challenge each other's ideas. Like, it's not even just one ideal concept. It's like, man, there's two. Like, what do we how are we going to see these two different perspectives? And I think in this course too, which has been really nice, is when we read surveyors material, we read someone who's already given a spiel of what they've understood from it, what they took from it, what they see from it. And so I think that's been something that's been really really awesome when studying American literature. And I think too, one of my favorite things, like I mentioned before, is like seeing the other perspectives of history, because I think if we focus on one, it's like, man, are you really paying attention? Are you really, like, open to the idea of other things? And so that's what I think about that. And I think overall the topics of racism, social status, inequality, and immigration are all things we tackle in this class when it comes to the studies of American literature. I think all of these play a part in each specific thing, which is it's what we need. It's what we have to learn. And I think that I think this course did a really good job at teaching all of those things, and I think they're all really important to the studies of American literature. Um, yeah, and I think when I'm thinking of, like, specific texts that focus on American customs, I think we're gonna there's I'll go more into depth about them in different ways. But I think I think people who tackle these ideas are Carlos Bulasan, where he explains the customs of how he was perceived in America, has and how he tackles this idea with the migrants, and how um, he thought it was going to go a certain way, but it didn't. And he ended up becoming an activist for this specific group because of the tensions that were made. And even before reading into the literature, something we learned from Corrigan, James Garcia, Fitzer, Clark, is how we understand the literature and perhaps the world from disciplinary perspectives, and not only to read and write like literary scholars. I think understanding these different perspectives become really important. To understanding it. And even the threshold concepts of text, meaning, context, form, and reading, I think, are all ways that we have to learn to understand American literature, and even study it, because I think those things are very relevant. I apologize. Um, and so, yes, I think, in conclusion, they help educate, they help teach, they help understand. And I think it's really important when we study American literature, because it's honestly just a different way to where we can, do things, and we can, understand things. And I think American literature is so important because it concerns groups of people that aren't really particularly picked when it comes to studying our regular history, and that even challenges the idea of what we're learning in K through 12 schools and what the curriculum is for learning about history. But you know, coming into college, I think what concerns that is honestly just understanding them. And so, yeah, I think overall it's really important to understand it, and I think that there is a lot of surveyors within the semester that we've gotten to learn a lot about when it comes to these certain things. And so, yes, thank you so much for listening, and thank you for just hearing me out about what I think about these things. And so, thank you so much, and I'll see you. Bye bye.